Awesome. Well, welcome, Ian, and thank you everyone who hopped on today's call. Ian, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Thanks, Saxton. It's great to be with you. Before we get started, I just want to thank you and the BSN team for hosting today's webinar, and also to all the iSport 360 newsletter readers and app users and our friends in the iSport 360 community. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Awesome. Um,
Uh, Yeah, I forgot to do the introduction part. So, for those of you just joining, to introduce myself, my name is Ian Goldberg. I'm the founder and CEO of iSport 360. I'm a sports dad for two teenage daughters, and I'm also a volunteer coach. I've been coaching my daughters in just about every sport over the last 15 years.
Awesome. And just to give you guys a little background on myself. So I'm an associate marketing manager here at BSN Sports, and I handle all things social and webinars. It's been a super fun experience. I was also an athlete growing up. I played soccer at nearly every level you can imagine, all the way up to a national level. So that was a great experience, and also ran track and cross country to kind of supplement my soccer journey. But we will go ahead and jump right in. Ian, can you tell us a little bit about the iSport 360 platform and its role in today's sports?
Yeah, absolutely. So after coaching for a few years, I realized, at least in my experience, there was a bit of a breakdown in the communication between parents, coaches, and the kids on the team. As an example, especially when the kids were younger, I would send them onto the field with some instructions about what we wanted to achieve today. And in soccer, for example, it might have been about make some great passes, use some great footwork. Um, but I found that the parents on the sideline across from me were frequently just yelling out to their kids, go for the goal, shoot. And that becomes a breakdown in communication. It causes confusion for the kids. And so I decided to create an app that helps coaches, kids, and parents get on the same page, set some goals and expectations at the beginning of the season together, share feedback, track progress, share training assignments and training videos. That way, parents can have real insight into what the coach is doing, and they could be a lot more supportive of the coach rather than working against the coach.
You know, Ian, I would be lying if I said I didn't hear parents constantly yelling during my soccer days and didn't know it didn't matter what it was about, but you could always hear their voices over even the coach. And I had a pretty loud coach, and that did not compare to two teamfuls of parents yelling from the sideline. So it would definitely be great if we had something like this when I was playing soccer growing up.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, was there a specific moment that made you realize a need for a platform like iSport 360?
For me, there was definitely one moment that sticks out in my mind, and that was I was coaching my older daughter. She was 8 years old. She was on a travel soccer team. Um, there was one girl on the team whose mom was extremely vocal. And every time she would go out there, I would tell her some instructions, and her mom would tell her the complete opposite of everything that I said. And at one point, this poor 8-year-old girl came off the field crying. And I said to her, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Coach, my mom is yelling the opposite of everything you're saying, and I don't know who to listen to." And that was definitely the moment for me. And that inspired me to start this company.
Awesome. I can definitely remember back, not so much as I got into the older ages, but at that young age where it's mostly kick and chase. And then even a little advance from that, I remember my dad definitely liked to contribute from the sideline. So I can definitely relate to having parents like that. What makes sports parents unique, and how have you learned, what have you learned about sports parents in particular?
Yeah, well, I think we could do a whole webinar on what makes sports parents unique. And maybe we will do that one day. But I think sports parents are one of the most misunderstood creatures on earth. It's just perplexing how a lovely, friendly person from your neighborhood who you may be friends with can turn into a monster on the sideline of their kids' games. Or frequently, the monster on the sidelines of the game is us. It's been me at times, and we're thinking like, what happened to me? What came over me that made me behave this way on the sidelines? And so I've just been spending the last 5 years studying this phenomenon. And we've spoken to psychologists and behaviorists. And what we've learned is that when parents are on the sidelines of their kids' sporting events, they are in fight or flight mode, meaning they're amped up. Their stress levels are high, their emotions are high. And when that moment happens, when their child either is fouled or gets knocked down or doesn't get the call they want, they kind of lose control of their actions and they lose control of their words in a way that psychologists would call reflexive. Reflexive is what you do when you sneeze, your hands come up to your face reflexively. So on the sidelines, these words start coming out of parents' mouths reflexively without them even thinking. And usually it's embarrassing for their kids. Usually those words are targeted at the ref or a player on the other team. And it's just a major disruption in youth sports today. I mean, if you ask sports organizers, what is their biggest challenge? It's usually related to the parents and the parents' behavior. So that's a little bit about the psychology and the physiology. And so, we have a newsletter that reaches over 10 million sports parents now, and we frequently talk about how to control your own sideline behavior. And it's really a study in discipline. It's really about catching yourself in that moment when you are about to explode, recognizing that your heart rate is up, that your stress is up, that you're becoming really emotional. You cannot keep your butt in the seat any longer. And it's at that moment when you really need to take some deep breaths. You really need to focus on the fact that your kid is able to be out there playing and you're able to be at your child's game and enjoying that game. And it's very hard to do in the moment. So again, we could do a whole nother webinar on that, Saxton, another time perhaps.
And you see that these parents who are constantly yelling affect how the child, whether it's, are they constantly looking over to the sideline instead of looking at their coach? What do you see with some of this?
Well, I definitely have never seen any data, like quantitative data on how parents' behavior affects the child, but I do know qualitatively a couple of things. First of all, there's an organization called I Love to Watch You Play. And if you haven't seen any of their materials, any of their videos, they interview kids and they ask them, like, how do you feel when your parents are yelling out from the sidelines? And the general consensus is every child is embarrassed, whether their parent is cheering loudly or coaching them loudly or yelling at the referee loudly. It is generally embarrassing for the kids. So I would encourage parents to really try to keep the volume down. The second thing is we've spoken to educators and psychologists about parents' tendency to constantly yell out instructions to their kids, most specifically the word shoot. And we know there are lots of parents at basketball games, hockey games, soccer games, especially when the kids are little, and they're just yelling out, shoot, shoot, shoot. And we know that that robs the child of the opportunity to make a decision on their own at that moment. And what does an 8-year-old or a 9 or a 10-year-old child do when their parents yell at them? They listen. And so they will shoot that basketball, even if it's the wrong thing to do or not what the coach wants them to do. So just a couple of qualitative responses to your question.
Sure. And so you talked a little bit about, yelling directions or, maybe yelling at them, but what are your thoughts on parents cheering for their kid during the game?
That's a great question. And you might be shocked by my answer, but I actually discourage parents from cheering loudly. I think it's super important for parents to let their kids know that they're watching. And so what I like to do with my own kids is give them a subtle thumbs up or a wave or a look or a smile. But I do not need to be the loudest cheerer on the sidelines. And the reason is cheering from the sidelines frequently devolves into coaching from the sidelines and yelling instructions from the sidelines and criticizing the other team from the sidelines. So a lot of parents don't realize they start with great intentions by cheering, and they wind up going to a dark place, and it's a very slippery slope.
Gotcha. And so parents, if you feel like they're not really supposed to be cheering or, yelling at them, and how do you incorporate parents to be part of this process, a part of their child's game? Because like you said, parents are very fight or flight, very protective of their kids. So how do you incorporate them into the sport?
Yep. And Saxton, I think that's kind of the crux of what we wanted to cover here today. And I know in the audience, we have a lot of sports organizers and administrators and coaches. So here's kind of the bottom line. I think if you don't make parents a part of your club's process, then they will be part of your club's problem. That's bad. Second, I think we need to let parents know at the beginning of the season, and especially newer parents with younger kids in the club, we need to let them know that we want their voice to be heard. Ideally, if they have ideas, to share them through email or in person. But that's really where we want their voice to be heard, not yelling at referees from the sidelines, not yelling at their coach from the sidelines. So they need to know they have a voice. But I would say here are three specific ways that you can help make parents part of the process. Number one, set expectations. If you're the administrator of the club or you are the coach, set expectations with the parents on the team that you have 4 goals for this season. Number one is to improve skills of the players on the team, and that's athletic skills and life skills. Number two, let the parents know that you are going to be building a love of the game. That's a really high priority. Number three, your goal is for the kids to have fun. And number four, you are going to nurture a competitive spirit amongst the kids. I think if you tell parents that those are the 4 priorities and goals for the season, they will understand it's not all about winning games. And it's not just about recruiting the next Messis in this world, that there are other priorities, especially at the younger ages. So that's point number one. Point number two, I would encourage, if I'm the administrator of a club, I would encourage the coaches to be extremely forthcoming when they're communicating with team parents. So obviously, in regard to schedules and routines, that's important, but also sharing feedback after a game, sharing feedback between practices, letting parents know what you're working on, because we've found parents can really chill out on the sidelines a lot more when they are in the know, when they know what the coach has been working on and what the coach thinks of their child. So that's point number two. And then point number three, I would create a culture within your club and within your team that encourages kids to speak on their own behalf. If a parent has an issue with playing time or what position their child is playing, which they always do, encourage them to send their kids, even their 8-year-old or their 10-year-old or their 12-year-old, to come speak to coach and talk it through. I mean, the parent should be present there too, that's fine, but this is not a conversation for the parents to lead. So those are kind of my 3 recommendations for making parents part of the process.
And Ian, I definitely agree with you on that last point. From my soccer career or track, when something kind of wasn't going the right way, or I felt like maybe my effort wasn't getting shown into playing time on the field, I know that the conversations I personally had with my coach were the ones that he really respected and, had the, best results rather than, my parents, which my mom was always team mom growing up. So that kind of added an extra level of, Mom, I got this. So I think, teaching your kids, especially speaking up for themselves, whether they can do in a sport, I think that can also help translate, outside of the sport as well. And you
Correct,
mentioned,
but just to add,
yeah,
just to add on to that point, so we both agree it's important for kids to speak up for themselves. but that doesn't mean they're going to get their way from the coach every time. They
Absolutely.
need to understand there's a little bit of risk involved, but they have to learn this skill. And coach might agree with them or coach might disagree, but it's really important for them to learn early to speak for themselves.
Absolutely. And you talked about some of these like key points, like the four things that you want all parents to do. And something that's become more and more popular in youth sports is having parents sign preseason behavioral contracts that really commit them to, those four things you might have talked about, among others. What are your thoughts on these type of contracts?
So my soccer club in my neighborhood asks us to sign a pledge at the beginning of the season that we will, follow the rules and be on our best behavior. And many clubs do. And I apologize ahead of time for saying this, but you should tear those up. Those pledges, in theory, are great. But again, when the parent is on the sideline of a game, if you are watching a football game or a hockey game and you watch your child get knocked on their ass, your behavior is not being dictated by the pledge you signed 6 weeks ago. It's being dictated by what just happened to your child in that moment. And every parent wants to protect their child. So I think those pledges are a waste of time. I think nurturing a culture is a lot harder, takes a lot longer, but it will be way more effective.
Awesome. And I want to pause right here and just take a moment and let anyone in the participants, if you have any questions throughout any of this or something really resonates with you, feel free to drop that in the chat. We would love to answer some of your questions as well, whether it's about the platform, whether it's about your own parents, or something just kind of sparks a question that we talk about. We would love to answer those. So at any point, feel free to drop those in. But we will go ahead and keep going in the meantime. But I would love to know from you, Ian, what is the number one thing you hate to hear from parents during the game? Like you hear this and that is like, that's it. That's the one thing that you do not want during your games.
Yeah, it's probably the most common word I hear from the sidelines, and that's shoot. And we talked about it a little bit, but it is the reason I've written many articles about this is because I was guilty of it. My family would be sitting with me in the bleachers and we would be watching my daughters play sports and we would constantly be yelling shoot. And I only realized later on how much it affects your child in that moment. So we need to let kids make mistakes and make their own decisions. And perhaps they will shoot at that moment, but let it be because they thought it was the right thing to do or because the coach told them that was the right thing to do, not because you were yelling out from the bleachers for them to shoot at that moment.
Awesome. It looks like we actually got a hand from Barry. Barry, do you want to come off mute and go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. I was playing with the toggle, so I was starting to write it out. Ian, have you done any work with mission, vision, and value statements with parent groups and with kid groups and with coaching staffs and meshing them together?
Yep. I have interacted with some clubs that use that approach. I think it's great in terms of building culture for sure. It sort of forces the issue right up front. Like we are going to have a culture as a team and a club that's based on goals, that's based on a mission, that's based on certain prescribed responsibilities and behaviors. So I support that. I love it. What has your experience been with that, Barry?
Well, my job sort of leads me into that in mentoring coaches and athletes. And what I found, it really is a problem solver when you get into what you're talking about this morning. If you were to do it where you have a group of parents sit together, they do their own value statements. You have players do the same thing, you have coaches do the same thing, and then you put all three of them together and come out with that mission statement and then a set of values that you're going to follow. So during the course of the year, I agree with you, the covenant or whatever you want to call it, that maybe you just have to throw away, it doesn't work. This year, you can always go back to them. And I've seen it work firsthand where coaches will go back to a parent group and say, hey, we talked about this at the start of the year. Here's what you wanted. Here's what your kids wanted. At the end of the day, this is the way that we have to go because this is our values. So to me, it works.
Yep, I like that exercise, Barry. And but I also think, it depends on the club. It depends on how long this team will be together. I presume you don't do that with like a recreation or municipal program that's going to be playing together for 6 or 8 weeks. But certainly for clubs where teams are staying together for a little while and have some time and energy and money invested, I love that approach.
Yeah, and I've done it both with club teams, so over the course of a year, and I'm involved in hockey, and I've also done it with short term, like working with a provincial sports organization. All of our short term teams do it as well, except we exclude the parents in those groups. It's just the coaching staff and the kids there.
Yeah, good. That's a good approach. Thanks for sharing that, Barry. Saxton, by the way, I saw a few questions in the chat.
Yes, we had one just pop in. So it was kind of a two-pronged question. I think the second part would be a great follow-up for what we were just talking about. But they asked, what have you found as the best method to bring parents into the process?
Yep. I think tactically, one of the things that has become really popular since COVID came around in the last 3 years is, especially with our use of Zoom and other video platforms, I notice a lot of clubs have a pre-season like welcome call on a Zoom. So they invite all the parents, all the kids, all the coaches to the Zoom, and they talk about what are our goals for the year, what are our expectations. Sometimes iSport 360 is involved in those calls because if the club just started using our app, our platform, we would want to introduce it in an environment like that. But that's definitely a great place to set the tone for the season.
Awesome. And then the second part was, what research have you done to come to your conclusions?
Let's see here. Well, we have worked with academics at some of the biggest schools in the country that do sports psychology programs, especially. We have worked with psychologists. We have worked with people in the education space. So everything we're building here, in terms of our app and the features in the app, everything we talk about in our newsletter and address is all backed by experts. Admittedly, me and my staff are not academics, and we are not experts in psychology, education, behavioral, sciences, but we do bring in really smart people to help us to contribute to our newsletter and to drive the features in our product.
Awesome. If you feel like a club or your team or organization feels kind of broken, disorganized, doesn't feel like there's a lot of strong communication, how are some of the tools of iSport 360 helpful to help bring that club together?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Saxton. So, what I found is that when coaches can communicate very early on in a season that they actually care about and even love every kid on this team equally and want them to succeed equally, then parents start to have faith and trust in that coach, and they stop questioning the tactical decisions about, like, why did that coach sub out that player, or why did the coach change the lineup in the 6th inning. Those tactical decisions won't get questioned so much when parents really believe in the coach. And one of the ways that coaches can build that trust and have that faith from the parents is by frequently communicating, even over communicating. So, for example, the coach and trainer of my daughter's U14 soccer team is a 25-year-old guy, and frequently he'll be sitting around on a Saturday afternoon and he'll find some great soccer videos on YouTube and he'll share them with the team, and he'll say, this is exactly what we've been working on. I love seeing the professionals do these exact same things. Let's try to do the same thing. Or maybe he'll find a motivational video and he'll share it with the team. Like, let's get pumped up for this weekend. When parents see him thinking about this team and this group of players all the time, they have faith in him and they trust him. So I think, our platform is all about helping coaches build that relationship and that trust with the parents and the kids on the team, and nurturing not just their athletic skills, but their life skills too.
Awesome. And going back a little bit to my experience playing soccer, and like I mentioned, got to a very high level, and we had some good runs. I don't know if any of you familiar with with Surf Cup in California, but had the chance, we actually won it in my U15 year, which was very exciting. And you always know parents have less to complain about when you're winning. At least from my experience, parents seem to get really quiet when we were on a win streak. But in times when you're losing, how do you keep the buy-in of those parents and keep that trust in the coach, even if things aren't going exactly right on the field or the ice or the court?
The answer is it's really freaking hard, because every parent will say at the beginning of a season, I just want my child to have fun. I just want them to make friends. I want them to improve in this sport. And actually, in our newsletter, we've written articles about fun versus winning. What's more important? Every parent says fun is more important. And then you start the season, and I've had this happen to me personally when I was coaching. You lose the first 2 games, 3 games, 5 games. Now you have a bunch of furious parents on the team who have tons of ideas for how you can improve things. And it's really, really challenging. So I think we have to acknowledge that fun and winning go hand in hand. I think if kids are enjoying their time with their team and on the field, they will actually start to perform, and it will lead to winning. So that's the ultimate goal, is for all of that to just come together right. But it's really hard. It's really mentally challenging to be on a losing streak like that. One technique I've used is actually distract the kids, because 8 and 10 and 12 and 14-year-olds, they usually forget about the game once they leave. And if you schedule some fun social things for them, like we do team bike rides, we do team Gaga or team flag football, and it distracts them from the losses, and they continue to love their teammates. It's the parents who take the losses home with them and stress about them afterwards. So I would say use distractions for the kids. And as for the parents who can't let the losses go, we just need to do a better job of letting that stuff go. It's not the most important thing, especially in those younger ages.
Awesome. And Ian, we talked a little bit now about when games don't go our way, but what about during the game when certain calls don't go a team's way, whether the referee or the ump made a call that doesn't really go in their favor? Is it ever appropriate for a parent to address the ref?
That's a great question. I would say it is appropriate for parents to address a referee or yell at a referee or talk to a referee 0% of the time. 0. There is no situation where a parent should be addressing the referee. However, I do believe that there are times when the coach should be addressing a referee. For example, if the referee is not keeping players safe during the game and is missing really important calls that are leading to injuries, or that are like raising the anxiety and stress levels during a game where kids are actually trying to hurt each other, a coach should absolutely be vocal. But let's keep in mind, there is a tremendous referee shortage in this country. And you and I talked about this, Thaxton, because you were an official for, what did you say, 7 years?
Yeah, 6 or 7 years growing up.
Yeah, so there's a shortage, a tremendous shortage today. The average age of referees in our country is about 52 years old, so they're aging out. And the average amount of time a new referee lasts in youth sports is 2 to 3 years. They have a really hard job. We need to be very patient. And even professional referees will admit that 1/3 of the time they miss the call or they get it wrong. So how could you expect in youth sports for these referees to be perfect? We just need to change our expectations a little bit, and parents should not be yelling at referees.
Let me tell you, it was a hard job. So I lived out in Oregon growing up for about half the time, and we could become a ref at 12 years old. So at that very young age where you are youth sports still. You're able to, it's very small rec league, like 6-7 year olds running around. And then as you get older, you can get higher classifications. And I did it all the way up to, I was about 17 or 18. And at the time I, pursued higher levels of reffing certificates. So at the end, I was reffing college games, adult games, and I was a 17-year-old high school student trying to control both the grown men in the game or grown women, and then everyone else over on the sideline too. And at most you have 3 of you on the field compared to an army practically. So I think just showing some grace, because, we try our very best to get the calls right, especially I think having playing experience, like you're in the other side of it, so you kind of know. But then when you have parents who've never played, so I think the main thing is just giving them grace. I think everyone deserves a little bit of grace during sports, especially youth sports. But I think that's great that, you really advocate that parents should not go after the ref. If it's a coach coming from it, they might have a cooler head or might be able to talk through it more than a parent that might not have a full understanding of what the call should be or what the rules are. And, your coach should have a better understanding of those. So I think that's great.
That's right. But Saxton, what a great way for a young athlete to learn the rules of the game by becoming a ref or an umpire. And what a great way to teach them to make quick decisions. I mean, I think there's so many life lessons in becoming an official and learning how to officiate, but it's just not happening much right now.
I know it's unfortunate too, because I really agree that reffing, really helped actually me in my own games, especially because I was not always the best. I'll be the first to admit. If a call didn't go my way, ref, what was that? What was that call? And when you kind of start reffing and you have, people almost your age saying the same things to you, it is not as fun to be on the receiving end. So even just like that little piece, and then now, then you can keep your teammates, more under control. Like, hey, if you yell at them, it's just not going to go in our favor. The rest, it's not going to help. So it's definitely something to learn. I think respect, whether it's to the ref, whether it's to the coaches, the parents, having respect for everyone, on the field, as well as the sidelines. But very important lessons, I think there's to be.
Yeah. And I think going back to the idea of doing a Zoom call to kick off the season for your club, I think it's a good topic to talk about, showing respect to the referees and also nurturing a culture amongst the kids where they should not be blaming the referees for everything that's going wrong in the game. And too many times that is the case.
And parents or children are the biggest reflection of their parents. And
right.
If their mom or dad is screaming at the ref from the sideline in 2 years, what do you think that kid is going to be doing on the field? So right. It really comes full circle. So everyone, learning the same. And then kind of going off of that, do you think it's important to have children or the kids, depending on the age, involved in the kickoff meeting at the beginning of the year?
Well, in the kickoff meeting, 100%, I would say kids of all ages should be encouraged to join. An important topic, which again would be a deeper conversation for another time, is safe sport and all of the guidelines in our country about making sure that kids are protected from abuse, from hazing, from bullying. So one thing that's really important to remember, and something we've built into our own platform, is kids under 18 should never be in a one-on-one conversation with an adult coach. Not on text, not in person, not on the phone, not in a car, nowhere. And so I would encourage kids to be part of all of the communication preseason and during the season. But I would encourage parents to be there as well for safety, but also just to support your child. I mean, it's hard to encourage a 9-year-old girl to go up to their 45-year-old male coach.
Awesome. Going off of that, do you think parents help being in these meetings? Do you think parents help hold their parents account, or the kids help hold their parents accountable when they're involved in these meetings and they know the guidelines and the coach is going to get mad at you if you do this?
I think it wouldn't hurt to have some great marketing campaigns from the Positive Coaching Alliance or the National Alliance for Youth Sports or the national governing bodies like US Youth Soccer, to have some more campaigns that help parents understand how important their behavior is. It's hard for an 8 or a 10-year-old to impact their parents' behavior. But actually, Barry may have seen these, but Hockey Canada, going back 6 or 7 or 10 years, Hockey Canada did these amazing marketing campaigns where instead of having parents yell at their kids from the sidelines, it actually had kids yelling at their parents from the sidelines of their parents' activities. So the dad was on the putting green trying to make a putt in golf, and the kid is on the sideline yelling out like, "Come on, Dad, you're doing it all wrong." I mean, they were really funny, and we could use humor because it is kind of comical, but we need to do some more campaigns on this topic.
Awesome. Well, that was my last question I had for you today, Ian. Do you want to give any closing remarks for our participants here today?
Definitely want to wish everyone a great fall sports season, and thank you for coming today. A lot of what we talked about are topics that we cover in our newsletter, which I think almost all of you are readers. But also, I would encourage you to check out our app, iSport 360, which clubs across the country and in 9 different sports are using to open these lines of communication, to help share feedback and to help bring parents into the communication loop without making the whole youth sports experience about them. So thank you so much for being here today.
Awesome. Well, Ian, I want to thank you so much for being on the platform and joining me today. And I also want to thank everyone, all the coaches and athletic directors who hopped on today's call. We really appreciate it. And stay tuned for future webinars. Hopefully we can get Ian back on the platform. But again, just want to thank everyone for coming today. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thanks, Saxton.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.
Bye.